Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
It was insane, Ben. It was literally like every week, 2 desks were emptied out. One day I panicked, got home. My wife's like, well, put your resume on monster.com. This is like how long ago this was. So I literally posted the resume that evening, and the next morning at like 8 a.m. I walked into work and I heard, Andy, get into the office right now. And I walked in, I'm like, here we go.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
This episode is brought to you by Remote Assistants, the go-to partner for recruiters who are done wasting time on operations, sourcing, or marketing. Their remote assistants are pre-vetted and fully trained for an entire 4 months. We're talking sourcing, candidate follow-up, back-end automation, marketing support, all the things that pull you away from actually growing your business. So if you're serious about scaling your agency and want to buy back your time with real plug-and-play talent, go to www.remoteassistants.ai and get matched in under 48 hours.
I am so excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast because my guest is in a position that many people have spent a decade working in a search firm, putting their blood, sweat, energy, and equity day in and day out, growing the firm, knowing that they're one day going to help take it over. But what happens when that one day doesn't work out? What happens when the day that you've spent the last decade preparing for just doesn't happen? What do? Do you start over again? Do you go look for another firm to go spend another decade with and grow? Or is it the time that you might have to go create your own path? And that's why I'm so excited to have Andy on the podcast. And we're going to talk about like some of the things that he did the first 3 months for some absolutely incredible growth out of the gate. Everything from messaging to how we got the client. So I am so excited to have Andy on the podcast. So welcome.
Hey, thank you. I've been listening for, over a year now. So it's an honor to be here.
So before we get started and how you even ended up in this wonderful world, real quick, 30-second snapshot of what you're doing now with your recruiting company.
Yeah, so High Altitude Recruiting is a executive retained recruiting agency. We have 2 industries we support. They are complete polar opposites. So I run our food and beverage, and my father runs aviation, which is an industry he's been in for over 30 years. And yeah, like I said, we're senior managers up to C-suite.
That is definitely exciting. So let's take a step back. How did you end up in this wonderful world
Of recruiting?
of recruiting?
Yeah, crazy story. I was actually going to school to be a physical therapist, and it was a 7-year program. I was in year 5, got an internship at the hospital to work on an orthopedic floor, had met my now wife very early into the relationship. She said, you're pretty miserable. If you're going to propose to me, can you be happy with your career? And so I ended up dropping out of the PT program, and just through networking, I became a recruiter for a travel physical therapy company. And essentially it was a super high volume, 100 calls a day or 10 hours a week on the phone type of a role, really high turnover. I was fortunate enough that I got to go to a lot of college fairs and recruit brand new physical therapists because I could kind of speak the vibe and just, hey, this is what the role is going to entail. Go to this hospital, do X, Y, or Z. And crazily, I saw this turnover ratio. It was insane, Ben. It was literally every week, 2 desks were emptied out. Yeah. I mean, if you weren't meeting the quota of that 100 calls a day or 10 hours on the phone, or if you just weren't booking business, you were basically yanked. And so one day I panicked, got home. We just bought a house in Colorado, and my wife's like, well, put your resume on monster.com. This is how long ago this was. So I literally posted the resume that evening, and the next morning at 8 a.m. I walked into work and I heard, Andy, get into the office right now. And I walked in, I'm like, here we go. And she's like, why'd you post your resume on monster.com? I'm like, how did you see this so quickly? And I'm like, well, I kind of sat down. I'm like, you're firing everyone? She's like, you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing, but you got to take your resume off. So I went back to my desk and literally took it down. And within that, however long, few hours it was posted, I got a call from a healthcare company in Denver, and they're like, "Hey, we're looking for HR generalists. Are you interested?" And I was like, "You know what? Yeah, there's stability, and so that company gave you the opportunity to bounce between HR teams, and I again landed in recruiting, and I was like, I absolutely love it. I managed like Canada down to Baltimore and all of the hospitals and clinics, mostly New York, and I was like, this is for me, like getting to talk to new people every day, getting to work with multiple hiring managers. I basically hired everything from people mopping floors to physicians and everything in between. I absolutely loved it.
Okay, let's go back to this first recruiting place, the absolute crazy turnover that I'm just constantly like. The problem is I feel like I know like so many good recruiting leaders, but there are so many like places that are just absolute shitholes
Yeah.
that people just keep on like going to nonstop.
You know what? It was a great culture in the sense of like the people I work with were phenomenal. I still talk to a lot of them today.
Okay, good.
And the woman, Jen, who managed because the company was based out of Florida and they had a satellite office here in Denver, she was great with her training methodology. She just had to stick to the corporate policy of meet these KPIs or you're fired. And I remember getting a lot of valuable insight from her, but my God, it was sink or swim, dude. I mean, it was literally like miss your quota 1 week and you were on a PIP and you had like 3 days to fix it. And as you know, like any good recruiting sales cycle, it takes a minute to get in and I don't know that company operates under the same name anymore, which would be a massive red flag, right? That they changed the corporation and LLC.
And once we're done, I might ask you the name of it. I was like, oh, based in Florida. Okay, I think I have ideas now. But anyways, that's another story for another day. Out of curiosity, when you kind of went internal, did you actually make more money?
So yes, but not much. Like DaVita Healthcare Partners, which is based here in Denver, are really well known for underpaying their employees, but overworking them, but even better training them. So I always tell people that come to me fresh out of college that are here in the Denver metro, go work there because your resume after 2 years will just be packed. It's great. Like I said, they overtrain you, but they underpay you. So I think I was making like 40,000 as an HR generalist. Like it wasn't a ton, but it paid the bills. And we just bought a house, like I said. So my wife's like stability. And even there, I started off as like a temp employee. It was a 90-day contract. And quick, crazy story. I started off on this team called the Welcome Wagon, and they're like culture Kool-Aid. Like you can Google DaVita Kool-Aid like culture. It's insane what they do. They threw these like massive parties. Like the CEO one day entered a party on a zip line. Like he paid like $15,000 to get a zip line installed, and he was wearing a musketeer outfit, and he like zip lined in. But anyway, I loved working there. Some of my best friends to this day were people I met, but we were doing a carnival to close down our office and move into a new location. And I was like maybe a week away from my temp role being like expired. And they made us pick out of this bowl something you were going to do at the carnival. And I picked out having to do a ribbon dance. And my really good friend, Matt, now who's one of my employees, said to me, he kind of trained me. He was like, dude, if you go out there and like give a performance, you'll get a job. And you remember Will Ferrell from Old School? They just recreated that like ribbons dance. And they literally, like an hour after getting back from the carnival, I was called into the office with an offer letter on the table. And I was like, that's all it took.
You're my boy, Blue. Do you think if you didn't do that river dance, your contract would have been over?
No, I think I would have been hired because I was good. Like it was an HR generalist. And so you were onboarding I-9s. Like I was meeting all the numbers they wanted, and I was like a team player, and I was young in my career, like early to mid 20s. So I think I would have been high, but I think that was like, hey, this guy gets it, right? But
He was sort of a culture.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so you went internal for a bit. How did you end back up in the agency side of the house?
Yeah, I got recruited to a little firm in Golden, Colorado, and I think they reached out to me, and it was essentially like, hey, you spent a lot of time in college in the Midwest, and I love hiring people from the Midwest because of the values of family and work-life balance and culture and all that. So I got recruited to this agency. I knew nothing about it. I literally went for an interview. met with the entire team, and we went out for lunch. They said, don't dress up. So I dressed up. I was the only one like in a suit. Everyone's in like jeans and shorts because it was in the middle of summer. I'm like sweating. And yeah, I got recruited into it. And it was, again, one of those, hey, we know that you're probably managing 50 plus requisitions, which I was. And we know that you've been trained well. And so, yeah, got the opportunity to go agency and really kind of went in blindly because I'd never done it before. I didn't know anything about it, learned the whole world of retained versus contingent. And yeah, so glad that I took the leap.
Is that the place that you spent a decade at?
Yeah, I was there for 10 years.
Talk about like the internal growth that you had there to even get to the conversation of potentially looking at taking it over.
Yeah, so I started off like entry level, they call them talent athletes, which I thought was kind of a cool title, but essentially I was just a recruiter working on executive roles. And these would be anywhere from director level and above. And, as a recruiter, you would always manage no more than 5 projects. That was like the sweet spot. My first ever role there, I think I almost got fired because I was so used to the corporate, okay, let's post it and let's just kind of let it, ferment online and you're going to get applicants. Well, we didn't post. It was all pure headhunting. And it was a VP of supply chain for Dairy Queen International. So this person was like supporting the Asian oceanic markets. And I'd never really worked in LinkedIn Recruiter before. And so it was like a whole new world. And I just remember like struggling because I was like, this is brand new to me. And Eric, the owner, who's my mentor today, like sat me down and was like, dude, you need to do X, Y, or Z, and really like held my hand through the process. It was phenomenal. And so I just kind of slowly worked my way up through the company, right? Taking on more responsibility. Once I got into a really good rhythm of managing clients, he was like, hey, I actually want you to like lead this project now, right? So we had a 3 interview kind of step. I would interview twice and then he would come in, do the final interview, and he would present to the client. And he was like, hey, you're ready now to present. So it's just slowly during that process, I gained like his trust and the trust of my team and just kind of ended up running operations for the company for probably 3 years.
Awesome. In saying this, like, I know the initial hook of the title or the hook of this conversation was like, what if it doesn't work out? I actually have a good friend that kind of grew within the organization and just bought his old company, which is a 30-person firm. So like, there are plenty of stories where this does work out, but just for the listeners, this is Andy's story. Okay.
Yeah.
So I also want to go into a little more things for the people that will actually want to grow and not start like their own company. Like you said, you take on additional things. What kind of additional things did you take on that really helped you grow internally?
Yeah. So one of the big projects that I led, so we had a good CRM system, but it was back in the day where it was like Salesforce talking to like Bullhorn, talking to our internal system. And so I'd said to Eric and the team, like, we need something way more streamlined. So he was like, go find something better. So we went out and we interviewed like Loxo, Crelate. We had like a ton of companies come in and pitch us, but we're very transparent with our search. And that's something I still do today is like, hey, Ben, you're the hiring manager from day one of the project starting. You have full transparency of what we're doing and what you're paying us for. So we needed a CRM an ATS that allowed our clients to log in and really like see everything that we were doing. So that was my first big project. And then kind of outside of that, it was, okay, like AI is becoming a thing now. So like what tools can we use to, help us from like an AI perspective? And then in addition to that, it was just like cost cutting procedures and savings, right? Because we went through COVID. And so that was where I left the company very shortly during COVID because, as you know, the world shut down and I got an opportunity to go help a tech startup here in Denver supporting the clinical trials. So I left for like 6 months, but then came back. And so it was little operational things. And the one thing I loved, and I would say to anyone who's going to an agency where you would get the opportunity to buy out or maybe invest in, find that mentor and partner who gives you the opportunity to sit on every meeting. Like I remember Eric saying to me, like, if you're going to really truly do this, you need to be on all financial calls, accounting calls, tax calls, client calls. Like, you need to do everything, right? He's like, I don't want you to take this over and then be like, well, you never trained me for any of this. So I was really fortunate that I got to sit in and have him say to me, you make the decision now, right? Like, what applicant tracking system do you want to use? You know, like, what AI tool do you want to use? And there was some money wasted because we took gamble, but it was really great that he was like, hey, you're head of operations. You make the decision.
So were you head of operations while also still closing deals?
Yeah. Still doing like full cycle recruiting, right? So still managing clients, still showing up, still interviewing, and then also running the operations as well.
Which ATS did you guys end up selecting?
God, I knew you were going to ask me. My brain is like failing me right now. Why can't I think of it? I can't think of it.
Well, and when it comes down to it, also, like, did you like initially start this conversation like, hey, I would love to one day grow into leadership? Like, how was that initial like question asked?
So when I came back from COVID, having that short stint away, I had said to him, if I come back, I need to head into my 40s clockwork. Sorry.
Clockwork. Okay.
Clockwork. I absolutely love it. It's great. If anyone needs like a good ATS, there's cheaper out there, but it's great. So when I came back from the COVID 6-month hiatus, I had said to Eric, like, hey, I'm about to turn 40. I have a young son at home. My wife is like absolutely crushing it in her career. I want to do something that leaves me like not a legacy, but I need to have something that I'm working towards. I basically said to him, like, I want to buy in. And he had said, well, I actually was going to buy into a company. I invested and I lost it all. So I'm not going to let you do that because we're still coming out of COVID. And so I'll tell you, like, Eric is like a second dad to me, right? So he was like, what I will do though, is I will let you sweat equity in. So he's like, let me think about it. So over a week, he came back. I remember him walking into my house, sat down with my wife, and he's like, here's the sweat equity plan for you to buy into the organization when I'm ready to retire. And it was an amazing, amazing option on the table, like too good to say no to. And then the caveat in there, which was really helpful, was no matter what happens, if you leave the company in good standing, I'll cut you a check for whatever the equity is and you can fly. And so I was like, how do I say no to this?
Yeah. How do you say no?
No, it was, phenomenal.
And like, you guys are still friends today, right? And he's your mentor.
So we'll get into it. But like when I left, the biggest thing for me was keeping him as a mentor, right? He's been in the industry for 40 plus years. I love his vibe. I love his style. And we still not talk as much as I would like to, but we still send stupid Instagram reels to one another, stupid text messages, like probably on a daily basis. So we haven't lost that relationship, but he's going through a lot. And so I'm just kind of like, yeah, we'll figure it out. But yeah, no, I need him as a mentor down the road for sure.
Okay. So like fast forward, like you hitting the point of looking at the conversation of leaving or buying it out or whatever, like real quick, walk up to that and then kind of let's talk about that.
Yeah. So he had kind of gone through some evaluation of the company when some companies were coming in to buy it, but it was pre-COVID. And so he had a number in his mind that he wanted to sell it for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate enough that I have a VP of finance for a wife, right? So like pennies don't go spent in our house without her knowing and accounting for it. So she had said to me, like, the value is way too high for what he wants. And really, like, you just need to, like, either shit or get off the pot. Sorry for the language, right? So we sat down, and this was like a couple months conversation where we would go over, like, what we should do. And I just could not get my head around the valuation of the company. And I would share this with Eric, and I would say to him, like, hey, I just don't see it. And he's like, well, what I would sell it to someone else wouldn't be what I'd sell it to you, but the value was just too high. And then my wife was like, you know what? If you took your equity check and you left, you could do your own thing. You could be your own boss. You wouldn't have to really fall into a partnership. And then I was on a call with Eric one day, and he just said to me, I don't think you'll fully comprehend how to run your own business until it's 100% yours. And that was like the kick in the backside I needed. And then like a week later, I just called him and said, hey, I think I got to go do my own thing. And that's kind of how it started. And so it was like a kind of a combination of my wife being like that cheerleader, like just go and do it. If you fail, at least you can say you did it. And then Eric being like, you're never going to get this unless you go do it yourself.
Oh man.
Yeah.
The inflection points of like two different like lines come together right there.
Absolutely. And I don't think he intended to create that moment, but he created it, And I'm a big believer, like, hey, the universe is like now telling you, like, two of your biggest like supports are, like you said, meeting in the, I got to do it.
Oh man. So you made the jump.
Yep.
You started your own thing.
Yep.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I know I want to share what you did because we've had these conversations behind the scenes, but we're not going to talk numbers.
Yeah.
But you had incredible success coming out of the gate. Day one, or we'll just say the first week of your own business, what did you actually do?
I had a non-compete with my old agency. And, nowadays non-competes are like no good, right? But I needed to, as we talked about, like I needed to maintain the mentorship. And I remember the first day I went live on LinkedIn with the company, I got a text, we need to talk. And it's from Eric. So I call him immediately and he's like, first, congratulations. Second, don't take any of my fucking clients. And then the third thing was he's like, now let me tell you everything I did when I started my company and where I failed and where I succeeded. Right. And so we had this like beautiful conversation. He was like, let's grab lunch next week. I'll give you your equity check. Like, yeah. And so
he was a man of his word with that.
Oh, absolutely. It was in our contract. Right. And like,
I mean, I've seen things in contracts and I've seen it become like total hell.
Yeah. No, it was like, yeah, it was great. And so the one thing I was always, until this day, like I have a year non-compete. I still won't touch clients. Even 2 years from now, if they call me, the first thing I'll do is call Eric, being like, you still in business? Because they're wanting to do, I don't know the answer, right? But so I decided, I was like, okay, I need to go to market and let people know who I am and what I'm doing. So first I reached out to my entire network of like, hey, I just started my own thing. So I created a Dripify campaign with just, hey, we haven't connected for a while. Do you have 5 minutes? Want to tell you about my new venture.
Okay, pause right there.
Sure.
You did everybody in your LinkedIn network.
Everyone that I was a first connection with that I had either not worked for, but I had either knew from college, people that we had pitched in the past that we didn't get business from, and or just people that I had interviewed in particular roles that I was really close with. And like, Ben, we were with some amazing clients. So I'm talking like the president of Mars Pet Care. Like the Rolodex is amazing. So I was just like, I got to get this out there and let people know what I'm doing. Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to pause you on that is because so often I think like a lot of people don't take advantage of their own personal network.
It's huge, right? It's like, I quickly found out, and I think every recruiter knows this, like you get so many people who reach out to you with like, hey, here's my resume. Can you find me a job? And it's like, there are a lot of recruiters who can do that. But I'm like, sure, I can help you with your resume to find you a job. But like, I'm actually working for a company. Like I'm like an extension of their HR team. So unless your background perfectly aligns, and in my 15 years of recruiting, literally this week is the first time someone's reached out to me like, hey, I need to find a new job. I'm a chief of staff and I know of a chief of staff opening. And I just ping the hiring manager like, I don't want any comp on this. I'm just trying to help a friend. Can I connect the two of you? Outside of that, it's just never, because the roles are just so specific, right?
If you want a good laugh, I think that's only happened to me once, because like, it's always a thing where I've always tell people, I'm like, hey, like we don't find people jobs. We help companies find people jobs. But had somebody coming out of the military, a friend of mine in South Carolina, hit me up like, hey, coming out of the military, looking for a job. You got any hookups? I was an internal recruiter and I had one position in Charleston that I've ever had. And he fit it perfectly.
It never happened.
I'm like, I literally was just like, this never happens. Like,
yeah, it does.
This is an anomaly. Do not ever believe this will ever happen again.
Yeah. No. And like the role that I currently like, I'm literally in a Slack group for food and beverage companies and someone posted it. And I've never talked to the CEO or founder. I literally messaged him like, I don't want anything from this, but it's a friend. So I would like to introduce you. And he was like, yeah, great. But it never happens that way.
Anyways, okay. So back to the things that you're doing your first week. Okay. So you just Dripify campaign, talk to everybody, start conversation with everybody. What next?
So then like, this is where the storm gets a little bit crazy, right? So as I said, we had two verticals. We got food and beverage and aviation. So the largest aviation conference in I would say the world, Dubai kind of matches this, is something called MBAA, and it's in Vegas. So my dad's like, we got to fly out, we got to get our name out there, and we got to shake hands, kiss babies. So we booked a trip to go to Vegas. And the reason I'll get back to that, because I truly believe in like the trade show, walking the floor and meeting people, but a massive deal was done. But on the other hand, I'm like, okay, food and beverage, I've got some amazing candidates in my like Rolodex, but I've worked with even better brands. So I created the, ICP, and I was like, I know the 6 or 7 people that hire retained agencies. So I created like just a very simple, hi, I'm Andy. This is my experience as a recruiter. Here are some of the brands that I've worked with. I will do your next search for $10,000. And I hit send. And I think I sent to maybe 25 or 50 people just to dripify, right? So did the whole like look at profile, connect if I wasn't connected. And then I got 6 positive responses, 3 of which were, can we talk tomorrow? And then another 3 that were like, hey, we're not hiring right now, but this is an amazing deal. To which I just responded with, keep this as a receipt. Like, I'll do your search. And then I went in and pitched. Ben, my whole thing, because I was reading Alex Hormozi's book at the time, provide an offer that's too good to say no to. And so I'm like, I know I'm a good recruiter. I've worked with some amazing household brands. That's going to turn heads. Give them an offer they can't say no to. So then when I went into the pitch, I said to each of the companies that wanted to talk about that first role, anything after the first role, I'm going to charge you a % of first year salary, but I'm going to be way lower than the competition. I just want to get my foot in the door. And so knowing industry is anywhere from 25 to 33%, I was like, I will go lower. And I had like honest conversations with the HR teams of like, hey, what are you paying now? Because I'll beat it. And like every company told me, oh, we're paying 28%. I'm like, great, 25. Hey, we're paying 25%. Great, I'll come in at 22. I was like, I gotta create. And so my wife was like, hey, are you actually making money already? And I was like, yeah, we're 2 weeks in. And we're like, now I'm panicking. So I'm like, I don't have an applicant tracking system. I don't have like a billing software. I was like, I'm just going to run this with Google Sheets, LinkedIn. And then the craziness of this all, Ben, is like LinkedIn Recruiter. I called Eric and I was like, hey, you've got 7 seats not being used because he did this massive like deal. I'm like, can I rent one of those from you? And he was like, hell yeah. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, I did these deals. And he was like, sweet. That's money like I'm paying for it and it's going, not used. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Out of curiosity, that initial pitch, that flat fee that was way under market, that it's so good that people actually had to message you back.
Yeah.
Do you still use that hook?
Not now, just because we're kind of rocking and rolling and we've gotten some really great clients. But I will say this, when you're in the executive space, you don't want to spin your wheels on roles that take up a ton of time, right? Like speed is everything. So when I did the $10,000 thing, a lot of the roles that I got were lower level, which was fine. But with the 2 clients that I closed my second week of business, with the 2 roles, I immediately went to them with a slate of candidates that then created more work under that first year percentage deal, right? Yeah. And those were higher level positions. So it was kind of like hey, let's try this guy out, see how it goes. And so that's where I think I was really really lucky. And I talked to another recruiter through networking and she was like, oh, I only ever charge 10,000 for roles. And that's where I was like, oh, there's something there. And then with the Hormozi book, reading that line of like, create an offer you feel stupid saying no to. And I'm like, let's just try it. So I was thinking of maybe going back to it, but I also want to have the team around me that could probably support it. So if I get to a point where I hire like a junior recruiter, maybe doing that and saying to them like, hey, you manage these roles start to finish. And kind of doing what Eric did for me with like, hey, be the ball and just go do it.
Real quick, Eric called those, what was it, like talent athletes?
Yeah.
I love that name.
I like that name too.
It's definitely genius. And you mentioned also like for people that aren't familiar with like the retained search world, that there's like 6 type of people that typically sign those kind of deals. What are those 6?
So depending on the size of the organization, like if you're looking 5 to 15 million in revenue, it's usually founder CEO whoever's leading operations, right? And that could be any title from director of ops, VP of ops, head of ops. If they have an HR team, it would be like an HR director or manager. A lot of the companies we work with don't have a talent acquisition team. They have a generalist who's already like overwhelmed and overworked, so they hand off the recruiting. Now, saying that, we worked with clients at my old agency like Nike, Whirlpool, and so they had a talent acquisition team. So it would be like director of talent acquisition who would hire us.
Okay.
And yeah,
And you were like, some of these messages were actually just reaching out to like the founder and also the HR director.
I would reach out to all of those titles. Yep. And just let them know, like, and interestingly, 2 of the deals were founders and CEOs that were like, hey, I'm going to put you in touch with who does our hiring now. And I got connected to human resources.
And you said and we were talking offline, you said the first 10 messages you sent, you got a 60% response rate and you got clients right away.
Right away. So we had landed in Vegas for that conference. I had my family from England in town. I'm in the Uber going to our hotel and I'm on the phone talking to like a head of HR while my son and my 2 nephews are in the background, like goofing off. And I'm like, can you just shut up for a minute? You know, and my wife's like, what are you doing? Like, this is not the time. Like, they're calling me. I can't not like pick up the phone, you know? But yeah, it was immediate response, but I was very specific with who I reached out to, right? Like that ICP was very, very specific. Like I was making sure that when I was reaching out to them in the organic food space, that the 2 people I put in my message of like, here's who I've worked with in the past and recruited for were either direct competitors or like very similarly aligned business models. So I knew that they could either call that company and be like, hey, have you worked with Andy before? Or, hey, if he's recruiting for them, he can recruit for us.
And was there any other things that you were doing BD wise that you do so well out of the gate like you did?
We did email campaigns that did not work. And then I called people. I just called, picked up the phone and dialed and went that route.
Out of curiosity, were these cold calls?
They were calls to people that I had either recruited but hadn't talked to for years.
Okay.
Yeah. So someone that I had hired, not people I had hired because I didn't want to touch the old companies, but people I had interviewed that I, really liked, we presented, and maybe they weren't the right candidate. The people I just like had great rapport with. So they were cold in the sense of like, they weren't expecting me to pick up the call.
Okay.
And a couple of them were like, how do I know you again? And, oh, I recruited you like a few years ago for this. Oh, and then that conversation.
Gotcha. Okay. And this is something I probably should have highlighted at the very, 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 very beginning. So it's my fault for this. 90% of the business that you have is referrals.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So you're not out there pounding the pavement every single day right now.
Oh, no, I still am because I feel like you have to do that. But every client that I work with, I do ask the question of like, who in your network? So as you know, right? Like, and honestly, Julia, I remember asking back in January on your summit series, do I niche down? And Julia was 100% like, you got to niche down because I was still flirting with the food and beverage aviation.
Okay.
So niching down was huge for me. And the reason I bring that up is because, as you know, the world gets really small in certain industry, right? So when I finished up with a client, I would say, hey, do you mind writing me like just a recommendation or being a recommendation in the future? And who do you know right now, competitor wise or maybe partnership wise, that could be using recruitment? And a lot of the times that drummed up one piece of business for me. And then conversely, I consider this a referral. I interviewed a president and put him through our paces. He ended up not getting the role, but he was like, I really liked how you recruited. Can we hire you? So I like actively seeked him to headhunt him. And then he turned around to be a client like 3 weeks later.
Okay. So what are you doing different that people just...
We spend a lot of time hiring for culture and culture fit. Okay. I am a massive proponent of getting on site with my clients. So luckily, one of the first clients I booked was an hour drive north of Denver. So I remember vividly on the phone call, signing the contract, sending it back and forth. And then I said to the head of HR, hey, when I'm back from Vegas, when can I come up and come on site? She's like, why would you do that? And I was like, well, I want to walk through the front doors of the company that I'm trying to recruit for. I want to learn from, your senior leadership team, what it's like to work here. I want to walk the manufacturing floor. I want to see the whole thing if I'm allowed. And she was like, absolutely, you can come in on Tuesday. And she's like, I'll give you a conference room if you want to work here for the day. And I literally sat in the conference room and I met the founder. I met her daughter. I met the senior leadership team that was going to cross-functionally work with the director of food safety that I was hiring. And then, Ben, when you go to interview these candidates, to be able to say like, yeah, I was up there talking to X, Y, or Z who you're going to work on this project with, your value add is so high. And so I'm just a massive proponent. And something I learned from Eric is like, hey, you need to go meet the companies. Like we had a company that we worked with 10 years ago that was a car manufacturing, like OEM. They made like the knobs and dials that go on your car. And like, I would never have known this, but when you walk into their facility, you're literally going through one of those doors that like flushes out all of the germs on you. Like it like kind of cleans you with this spray. And then you have to change into a jumpsuit to be able to go into the facility. And so to be able to share that with people that you're recruiting, they're like, oh, this recruiter actually knows like and has been on site. And I also kind of very much go like, hey, I'm the recruiter. I can't answer a lot of these questions because they're really high level, but I'll get you in touch with who can. So it's like a fake it till you make it kind of mentality, but also knowing when to draw the line to go, hey, these are questions that are better suited for the hiring manager.
Oh, wow. What piece of advice would you give to somebody that's about ready to go launch their own company based on like the success that you had in such a short amount of time? Or what's the best advice that you would give to somebody to relaunch themselves into what they're doing?
Honestly, for me, and I didn't know this when I was doing it because I feel like I jumped head first and I had the experience of like, okay, I've been in this world and know what it's like, but it was the baby steps of the small, like incremental, like growth, right? Because when I finally got my first client, which came quickly, as I said, I was panicking because I didn't have the ATS, I didn't have the CRM, I didn't have all that stuff, but I knew what I could use, right? But because I had laid the foundation of like baby steps along the way of like, okay, I've got my website, I've got my brand, I know what I'm doing here. When the snowball started to roll, I was kind of just ready to go. So I would say to people like, you're not going to get immediate success. I was extremely lucky, but I was very specific with that success. I was very specific with what my action plans were going to be, which led to the success. So it doesn't happen overnight. And I've been in a low Q1, like it hasn't been great. Like my wife was like, hey, Q4 was awesome for you. What's going on in Q1? I'm like, well, the tariffs, like food and beverage. It's just, it sucks. There's stuff out of your control. But I was talking to Dom yesterday, who, by the way, one of the first episodes I ever listened to was him on your pod. And now he and I are like super close because I reached out to him like, hey, heard you on Ben's pod. Absolutely love you. Don't love the Detroit jersey in the background. We just had banter. And he literally called me like 5 minutes later. And he's like my biggest sounding board. And so my other piece of advice for people starting off is like, there are going to be recruiters in your network that are going to support you and build you up. And there are going to be some that don't, but having that community has been huge. Like Dom's round table every Thursday. Today, there's a call with multiple recruiters that Thomas, I forget his last name, holds every Friday. Yep. Like being on those calls and just getting that, hey, what problems are you seeing? Like, what are you encountering? But if I were a new agency owner today, I would say find your niche. And if you've got previous clients you've worked with, go in with that offer. Right? Here's who I worked with. Here's what I can do. And here's this like lowball offer. Just get your foot in the door. That was my biggest thing. Get my foot in the door.
And so remember back when Eric told you, you really don't know until you actually, it's 100% your company.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a thing that you were like, oh shit, he's right?
Yeah.
What is that?
My 7-year-old running around the house and realizing like you have to like provide for him. And like, I'm very fortunate that my wife has an amazing job and she said, go do this, but it's like keeping the lights on. Right. And like, for me, it's that legacy piece. Like I've always had 5-year goals in my life since I was 20. And it was like, hey, find a fiance, get married, get a good job, make $100,000, have a kid, buy a house. own your own company. So like meeting those goals along the way. But for me, it's providing for him and giving him a good life.
Was it like the realization, like, this is now on my shoulders?
Yeah. It all falls on me,
And you didn't have that when you were working at the company, or not as much?
Honestly, I didn't. Even when I was heading operations and I was running it, and the conversations were very deep into like, do you want to own this? Like, I never got that sense of like, this is mine. I never got the sense of like, if I take this over, I will be able to run it the way I want to run it. Right. Like, there was still, hey, this is a founder who's been running this for 20 years and things are going to remain the way that they're remaining. And like, I never felt like I could post on LinkedIn the way I wanted to post. I always felt like I was always like, oh, I shouldn't do that because I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you've ever gotten into one of those bad mood days where you respond to someone on LinkedIn and you go, you know what? I don't care how the response because it falls on my shoulders, right? Like, I'm not working for someone else,
I've had those phone calls too.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's another story for another day. All right. So you just talked about LinkedIn. Like, you just had, like, what was it, last week, like 500,000 impressions?
Yeah. So over the last 2 weeks, like it was I forgot what I shared with you. It was like 636,000. I was doing a call with a hiring manager and they said, can you run some comp data for me? Because I didn't feel like, so one of the things I do when I go to market on a role, like, I think the other thing you should say to new recruiters too, or people starting to learn it, say no, right? Like, I don't want to go work on a role if they're fishing with no bait. So if you're coming to me with a really low comp, I'm spinning my wheels. So I always run comp data for hiring teams. And I should say, I fix my fees. So I have no skin in the game when the contract's signed. If we're hiring at 150,000 base and they hire for 180, I don't get money on that $30,000 difference, right? Fees are fixed. So I always tell the client, like, let's go to market with the right dollars. And so I just ran the market data and the CEO was like, man, this is really valuable. You should share this. And so I posted it on LinkedIn, and literally, like, sitting in Palm Springs, my phone notifications, ping, 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 all these like requests. And I went in, I'm like, wow, it's like 100 people in 2 days who want to like add me or connect with me. And then all of a sudden I go to post like impressions and it was just like growing, growing, growing. And then last week did another pitch and I was like, oh, I should share this again. And it's just, yeah.
Where'd you find this market data? Is this something that you internally built? Just for people that might be looking.
Yeah, good question. So I use internal data from the past year of hires that we did both at my old agency and then up, to this date. Force Brands release their data, which is huge in food and beverage. You can go to the US Bureau website, right? I've honestly, Ben, we paid a company $300 at my old agency to run market data. And what they would do is take the job description, management, all that stuff, and then they would give you like a spreadsheet. While that was happening, I would secretly go to OpenAI, I'd go to ChatGPT, and I would run the prompts, and the numbers were damn near similar. So I was like, why are we paying $300 for this when we could get almost to the $10,000 range, And when you're talking big dollars, like 10,000 kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah.
So you going with like, hey, we're seeing these averages. So I've been doing a lot of like the deep, what is the AI that they're calling it? The deep search.
Deep research.
Yep. So I'm doing that. And then if I need to, like if it's really a client who's like, I need very like tuned in dollars, you can find third-party agencies.
You know what? That's another great thing for AI that you don't have to do, like the deep research. I mean, they have all the freaking data.
Oh, Dom and I go on like these Friday rabbit hole of like, what could this deep research do for us? And like, you should probably join the call because I
have a podcast episode almost every single time like you guys are on the call. Trust me, I want to.
It's whenever everyone jumps off, he and I are like, okay, let's nerd out. And him and Tom will be like, what could we ask this AI to do that would alleviate work for us? And every time we're always like, oh, we're like weeks away or months away from this being amazing.
I do consulting in the DoD space, and I had a client that hit me up. I was just like, hey, by chance, do you know any oral coaches? And I'm like, oral coach, Google oral coach. And it's actually like some of the proposals require you to orally answer all these questions. Mm-hmm. There's entire coaches that have like hundreds of millions of dollars of wins helping orals. And I'm like, deep research,
Yeah.
I need oral coaches in the DC metro, hit go. And then literally 20 minutes later, I'm like, here's my beautiful list of oral coaches.
Right. We had a client in Chicago, and I remember doing an intake call with them, and this was like our 8th search, and I'm like taking vigorous notes, and it was just around the time that I was starting to goof off with ChatGPT, right? And I remember uploading the notes and being like, create a job description for me. And it immediately comes back with this beautifully written one, and I send it to the hiring manager, and he was like, oh my God, like we only talked 15 minutes ago. This is phenomenal. And I was like, have you heard of ChatGPT yet? He's like, no. And I go, you should probably research it because it's pretty great. Now all job descriptions look the same, but back then the formula was like just cut and paste into Word doc. And I was like, yeah, incredible. Yeah.
Well, anyways, so if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, you can't see what's behind him. But you have a podcast also about 8 years.
I do.
Talk about that real quick before we jump over to the quick fire questions.
Yeah. So I was born in, you can't tell from the accent, I was born and raised in London, England, moved here when I was very young, and basically massive Arsenal fan, playing the Premier League. And a friend and I, they came over to the US for a preseason tour, and we were on a flight and we were talking about the team. I'm like, this would be really good as a podcast. And he's like, really? And so next day we were in, hotel room, and we sat around a laptop, we started talking. And consistency, we did a handful of episodes, and then all of a sudden it kind of grew into this, hey, these guys don't talk X's and O's, they're more goofy and make dick jokes, and like when the team loses, it's still fun to listen to them. And yeah, and we were 8 seasons into it. It started off with 2 of us. Now we have a team of 6. We've got people around the country or around the globe who like come on as regular guests, and we stopped counting at our 100th country. I don't know if you did this, but we were like so into the numbers of like, how many listens are we getting? And then we got the advice from someone very early on, like, don't worry about that. Just do it for enjoyment. We were like, okay, the only statistic where we're going to watch and data point is our 100th company. And it was Mozambique.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I always tell people like my first 100 episodes, I didn't even look at downloads.
No, we looked like the first like 15. And then we stopped like reading the comments because you get people with like, oh, Americans, what do they know about football? And it's like, well, okay, I have the accent, but my passport's not American. No, it was like,
I'm from the UK.
No, yeah. Like I actually like used to live in the shadow of the old stadium, like, but no, I would say like, I would be remiss without mentioning it. Like we were very much early on in the process told never podcast for money because your opinion changes very quickly. So we agreed that we would cover our fees, and then anything we made from the pod would go to a foundation that we created called Gooners versus Cancer, because my co-host's dad a few years before had passed away. And so we created this foundation, which then led us to the most amazing opportunities within the actual club. So every tour they go on preseason, we get press passes, we get to meet players, we get players that come on the pod. I mean, it was phenomenal. And so I mentioned to you just before, I'm launching a second pod called Altitude and Ambition, where I'm interviewing founders and CEOs of food and beverage companies that have seen tremendous growth in short amount of time. Recorded my first episode Tuesday of this week, and I've got 5 booked for next week. And these are like household brands that you see in Costco. And one thing, Ben, that I learned that I'm reminding myself, I was talking to the CEO of one of these companies, and she goes, Bain and Associates just listed us as like the new up-and-comer food and beverage company. She's like, we've been doing this for 7 years. She's like, and now we're a new up-and-comer. And she's like, Andy, I know you're like grinding and you're going to continue to grind. Like it's not an overnight thing.
I love that you've done an industry pod. I tell everybody to do an industry pod. I keep on telling myself that I'm going to do an industry pod.
But you got such a good thing, right? Like,
I always joke around that like, the summits are awesome and they help pay for the editor, but the podcast is like the biggest nonprofit in the recruiting space.
It really is. It really is. I will say, I think when you get into the industry specific, you expand your footprint. And like selfishly for me, it's a little bit of like, hey, I want to get on the radar of certain companies.
It is such an amazing way to get on the radar. Before the crypto market went crash and I lost all my money and some other thing, like we were looking at expanding into a whole new industry out of GovCon. And by the 5th episode, I had hiring managers calling me up asking for help. It really like adds yourself as an authority in the space out of the thousands and thousands of recruiters. Love that you're doing that.
And, the other thing I'll say to new recruiters, because you asked, and it was something I posted on your first summit back in January when Brent was on. And I said like, hey, I have a podcast that millions of people have listened to, but I'm afraid to put my voice on LinkedIn, like my video, right? Brent's like, what's your problem, dude? Like, and I remember you gave me shit and we barely knew each other, but I was like, I love it, because like, why am I not doing this? And so I was listening to a podcast yesterday. I think it was actually Alex Hormozy, because I love his like just his 30-minute fire chats. And he gave the advice of like, you get so caught up with, oh my God, what are people thinking about Andy or Ben or whatever? They're not thinking about us. They're only thinking about you when your content hits their feed. Then they think about you, right? But he goes, outside of your like family and friends who follow you on a regular basis and are actually curious about what's happening in your life, like why are you afraid to do it? And I remember Brent kind of giving the very same advice, right? And so for me, I was trying all of these different things of like, I didn't want to go viral, but I wanted people to see my content, and found very quickly that people care about comp. So that's where I'm going and like leading and then peppering in with like the video content. But I just did one the other day, a video on like just resume advice. And Ben, I literally got a call from a buddy who goes, hey, I just wanted to let you know I shared that with my new girlfriend and she changed her resume and got an interview. And he's like, I think it was because of the Instagram reel you created. So thank you. And I was like, that's awesome.
There we go. Awesome. Well, you kind of answered the first question a few minutes ago for like the quick fire questions. We're jumping it there because I've totally lost track of time. Sorry. No, it's a good problem. It's a good problem to have. So we're just going to jump ahead in the quick fire questions. What is a book that has had a huge impact on your career?
So I'm very fortunate that I've gotten to talk to him and gotten a lot of great advice from Dan Martell, but it's Buy Back Your Time. I absolutely love that book. I think a lot of it is a common sense, but it puts into perspective of like what you should be focusing your time and effort on. And I love that it provides a good work-life balance. And then I absolutely loved Hormozy's like $100 million deals, because again, I think it gives you a really good foundation of how do you build your brand and how do you capitalize on that brand. And so those are the two that I love.
Dan Martell has been on my wish list for podcast guests.
Yeah. And like I said, I was very fortunate that I went on a podcast right before his wife, and the guy who hosted it, and it hasn't dropped yet, is from Canada, and he and Dan ski together. And so he just connected us, and Dan and I had a really, really thoughtful text conversation. I would say, Ben, you should reach out to him because I think you'd be able to get him.
Cool. You know what? I'm going to do that this weekend.
You should.
Well, next question. Do you have like a favorite tech tool or rec tech tool that you absolutely love and cannot live without?
Dripify, right? Like, I don't love spamming people. I don't love just like email cold drip campaigns. But one thing I learned, and I can't remember if it was Brent who said it, but it's like, don't sell, serve. So I've had really good luck creating a Dripify campaign with all of my first level connections in the food and beverage industry, and setting up a campaign where I just give them knowledge and provide information on what we're seeing from the recruiting side of the industry.
Yeah, your drip campaign isn't even like a ask for service. You're just sharing shit.
Just sharing it. Like in one of the messages I put like, I can't remember specifically, but it was like a statistic from Harvard Business Review of like 76% of people are not looking for a job when they're happily employed with good compensation. And like, if you think about that, like on a granular level, then what if they're not happily employed? Like 76 is a massive number, right? So I just drop those little nuggets, and I have it timed to go out like every 10 to 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks. And then that way you're just planting the seeds, staying top of mind.
Absolutely love that.
And I actually had a CEO yesterday reach out being like, Andy, I know these are automated messages, but I love them.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, being a recruiter is hard. Like, how do you get yourself out of those funks?
Man, I've been in some this quarter just because it's been slow, but remembering that, as that CEO of the food and beverage said, you got to live your life in business in dog years. That's what she told me. Like, you don't become successful overnight. That's a 0.01% thing. If you just grind and remember it's a process and it's a sales cycle.
Awesome. Well, you're in a lot of chats, like you're part of these roundtables, you're part of groups in the community. I'm sure, especially like some of the success that you've had, if people actually knew the numbers behind the scenes, they'd be like, hey, give me the tactical answers. Give me this, give me that. What's the Dripify campaign? But of all those questions that recruiters probably have, like, what do you actually wish they would ask you?
It's a good question. It's such a tough answer. Yeah, that's so hard to answer. Honestly, if you asked me, the question I would like to be asked most is like building the brand is how do you best put your name out there? And as I said, it's getting out into your community, into your industry, going to the trade shows, walking the floors, meeting people. We didn't get to it, but like when we were in Vegas, we literally closed a $40,000 deal by shaking hands on the carpet of a expo floor. And that would never have happened if we hadn't gone and hadn't just like started small talk with random CEO of an organization. And I think people are so afraid, especially in the recruiting world, because they were kind of right now very salesy and there's so many of us serving, not selling, right? That was the biggest thing.
Awesome. Well, two things before I let you go. First of all, if somebody wants to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just Andy Rhodes. Instagram, the same. I got to get to your blue check mark 11,000 followers, Ben, on Instagram. My God, you're crushing. And then highaltituderecruiting.com is the company website. And yeah, please connect and please ask any questions that you have. Because I promise you, when you start figuring out like who your recruiting teammates are, like that run other companies, like Dom and I both hire for execs. We both also share secrets, right? Like your summit series, phenomenal. Like I would tell every recruiter, whether they're tenured or they're brand new, like go back and pay for Ben's VIP because just the value, like Julia's mind, like my God, I was like, I just want to follow her for a day. You know what I mean? Like she's just like to sponge that information from her was incredible.
One day if the podcast really turns any money, like I would love to do that. Like, all right, let's bring an entire media team and then just follow like a high performer today and just capture that.
Yeah. I'm not Brent where I wake up at 4 a.m. and like start my day. I'm waking up with my alarm and drinking 3 cups of coffee, but his energy and seeing the grind, I'm like, you can just learn from it,
If Brent does listen to this, like, I think it's Brent's fault this week. I've been waking up at 4 a.m. every single day, whether I want to or not.
I'm waking up like, and you don't want to think about it, but you're like, don't think about work. Don't think about work.
Well, anyways, this has been an awesome episode and time absolutely just flew. So, we'll have to like recap again down the road to really capture all the quick fire questions, but it's been a pleasure. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
No, hey, thank you so much. Thank you for this resource and this tool. Like, absolutely love it. And please connect with me and ask any questions if you have them.
Awesome. Well, I just want you guys to absolutely crush it. No matter if the tariffs are hitting your market or Doge is hitting your market, there are ways to still go crush it. There are ways to learn from other recruiters and put in the work because I truly believe, even with everything happening, that a rising tide raises all ships and we can all go win together in 2025. Go crush it.